Ancona, and I'm a professor here in the Work and Organization Studies group, and also the faculty director of the MIT Leadership Center. It is a pleasure to welcome you to today's Innovative Leadership Series, and a really true privilege to introduce our speaker, Jorge Bodenheimer. Now, we all know that having a great title and being a great leader are two completely different things. So I could easily introduce George as the retired president and executive chairman of ESPN, or as a cable industry pioneer, or as the company's longest-tenured president. But truthfully, that does not begin to tell the leadership story that is Jorge Bodenheimer. There is a reason that George was named president of ESPN just 17 years after joining the company, and where he remained in that role from 1998 to 2012. That is truly amazing in an era of shortening tenures for CEOs. He stayed even after that from 2012 to 2014 as executive chairman. There is a reason why he received the Vanguard Award in 2005 and was inducted into the Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame in 2012. George tells a little bit of his own story in his 2015 book, Every Town is a Sports Town. While describing his first job interview at ESPN as a recent graduate of Denison University, he recalls, and I'm quoting here, "Okay," the interviewer said, "based on this resume," this is, by the way, a college graduate, "you'd be qualified to be a driver," which is what we call our mailroom guys. They deliver mail around to the buildings and drive people to and from the airport. The job pays $8,000 a year. You wouldn't mind shoveling snow also, would you? The interview lasted 2 minutes, and the salary was less than a quarter of the starting salary offered by major corporations that were recruiting at George's alma mater. But he wanted sports, and he wanted entertainment, and so he took the job for $8,300. I don't know what kind of negotiating you did in there to up it a little bit, but $8,300, and the rest is history. He started as Dick Vitale's driver and then became his boss. Today, we take ESPN for granted as a major force in sports entertainment. But once it was a few trailers and a couple of young people who thought that actually maybe it's a good idea to have a 24-hour cable sports station. It was George who really spearheaded ESPN to the top, negotiating for rights, and just listen to this list, and it's only a few, to the NFL, the NBA, the World Cup, and the Masters. Not a bad list. The key to success being live programming, integrated sales and marketing, and a focus on technology. All brought to you by a company culture blending empowerment and caring. George empowered all of his employees, this is a great distributed leadership story, by the way, all of his employees to proactively take charge of their careers and to base their decisions on the company's stated mission: serve sports fans anywhere, anytime. On the caring side, George made a lot of time to spend with his employees, particularly those with cancer. In fact, some portion of the profits of his book are given to deal with this deadly disease. And right now, George serves on the board of the V Foundation for Cancer Research, along with the boards of Denison University, Under Armour, and SiriusXM. We are quite fortunate to have George share his leadership story and experiences with us today. So please join me in welcoming Jorge Bodenheimer to the podium.
Thank you, Deborah. It's truly a pleasure to be here at MIT today in the Sloan Management School in the iLead series. Truly an honor for me to be here. Such a great sports town and great town overall. I want to also thank Ben Shields, sitting right here, Professor Ben Shields, for this invitation. We probably agreed on this date probably 9 months ago or so. And Ben and I have known each other we were trying to figure it out this morning, for probably about 13 years when I took my daughter on a college recruiting trip, and we visited Northwestern. And I met Ben at that time, but I know it's a real coup for MIT and Sloan to have Ben on the faculty. And I know that personally because he was with us at ESPN for a number of years, 6 years in our marketing department, and contributed greatly. So it's a pleasure to know Ben, and I thank you for inviting me here today. I've been staying very busy in my post-ESPN life, and one of the things I do, in addition to what Deborah mentioned, is I speak to companies around the United States by virtue of my relationship with the Washington Speakers Bureau. And I give this talk that I'm going to give to you today, and I was thinking about it this morning on my way here, and it's really a story of how we led ESPN. In the book, I talk about the fact that I never used the word I, that I universally used the word we, and I felt very strongly about that at ESPN, and I think you'll see that as we go through it. But I think that I hope you benefit from it. Obviously, you're here, and it's the story of ESPN and how we grew the company to where it is today, nearly 40 years later. So with that, Deborah mentioned that I'm a mailroom guy, so I like to keep things simple. And I believe that there are 3 things that drove the ESPN company, and in fact, I believe can drive any company or any organization, whether you're running ESPN or AT&T or MIT, for example. If you get mission, brand, and culture right, you have a big head start on becoming a success. And so to talk about ESPN, I'll talk about them in this order. You have to go back, if you want to talk about the mission of ESPN, you have to go back all the way to 1978. Our founder, Bill Rasmussen, was the communications director for the New England Whalers. Any hockey fans in this room? I would think so in this town. This actually predates the Whalers entering into the NHL, so when they were with the WHA. And you may remember Gordie Howe and his family were very involved in the team. One day, our founder, Bill Rasmussen, got fired by Gordie Howe's wife, who was also very involved in the team. Bill was an ideas guy, a kind of serial entrepreneur. And so he had this idea for a 24-hour, at the time, just Connecticut's statewide sports network. I mean, the state of Connecticut, as many of you know, is about this big. And his vision at that time was a sports network for the state of Connecticut. It quickly grew after discussions to lease a satellite, but that's when it became a national network. But Bill didn't really have 2 nickels to rub together by putting the deal together to distribute the network on satellite, which was revolutionary at the time, cutting the first sponsorship deal with Anheuser-Busch, a familiar advertiser to many of you who watch sports, and also doing deals with cable operators to receive this 24-hour sports network. After this frenetic period of 18 months, borrowing money from friends and family, and truly being the definition of an entrepreneur, Bill Rasmussen's vision for ESPN came to life on September 7th, 1979. We have no idea how many people saw it. There is no way to know that. We weren't rated at the time. But I brought along the first couple of minutes of ESPN's existence for you to take a look at. September 7th, 1979.
If you're a fan, what you'll see in the next minutes, hours, and days to follow may convince you you've gone to sports heaven. Beyond that blue horizon is a limitless world of sports, and right now you're standing on the edge of tomorrow. Sports, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with ESPN, the Total Sports Cable Network. Yea, verily, a sampler of wonders. Hi, I'm Lee Leonard, welcoming you to Bristol, Connecticut, 110 miles from New York City. Why Bristol? Because here in Bristol is where all the sports action is as of right now. And we're just minutes away from the first event on the ESPN schedule. That's the 1979 NCAA College Football Preview. And then we're going to follow that with a doubleheader of games. 2 of the Professional Slow Pitch League World Series games will be seen tonight. Now, softball is one of those rare sports that everybody knows something about. Why? Because we all play it on Sunday when we drink a little beer. Now, here's another innovation on ESPN, and it's going to be a big part of our future. The Sports Center with George Grand. He'll have the latest on what's happening all around. George?
Thanks, Lee, and welcome everyone to the ESPN Sports Center. From this very desk in the coming weeks and months, we'll be filling you in on the pulse of sporting activity, not only around the country, but around the world as well. If it takes an interview, we'll do it. If it takes play-by-play, we'll do it. If it takes commentary, we'll do that too. That's the way we'll function from the ESPN Sports Center, and we'll be filling you in on further updates as the broadcast progresses.
Did I happen to mention that it was a relatively modest start? Someday, I just hope I'm still around, somebody at a big fancy dinner in New York City, maybe at the Waldorf Astoria, somebody stands up and says, New York City, only 110 miles from Bristol, Connecticut. Still waiting for that day. And how about that smooth little beer plug for Anheuser-Busch there, delivered by Lee Leonard. But you know, even though we didn't have it plastered on the wall yet, and we certainly didn't talk to our employees about it, that night, George Grand, on the very first edition of SportsCenter, which you just saw, essentially uttered the ESPN mission, and that is to serve sports fans. And we've been doing that ever since that first night on SportsCenter. We've been serving sports fans, mostly with sports that others didn't want to telecast. It wouldn't have been difficult for me to get tickets for you for this Boston College hockey game. How about a little slow pitch softball? That very first night, now here's an answer to a trivia question for your next party. The first live event on ESPN, the Kentucky Bourbons versus the Milwaukee Schlitzes, sponsored by Budweiser. I mean, we had the whole thing going. Oh, you don't have any football from the United States of America? Why don't we just import some from Australia? Yeah, that'll work. The referees look like pharmacists from CVS. We put up a graphic that said, we don't know the rules either. If you'd like a copy of the rule book, send us a postcard. Remember postcards? Well, we got over 12,000 postcards. I know. I was in the mailroom. And I had to lug all those postcards over to the marketing department to be processed. But all kidding aside, the ESPN executives of today, by the time they get to work, they know exactly how many people watch the networks, were online, listen to radio, et cetera. They have all that information before they get to work. In 1979, 1980, we had no idea that what we were doing and producing, people were enjoying. This little anecdote about the Aussie Rules football booklet was one of the first tangible pieces of evidence that we had that people were enjoying what we were doing. 12,000 postcards asking for a rule book for a sport from another country. It truly was a significant point in our history and really opened our eyes. And we still televise Australian rules football. But the point is, again, whether you're running an ESPN or whatever companies you're going to be running and involved with going forward, or whatever organization you are involved with, it's crucial, in my opinion, to define the mission of the company and to drive it home. The most important constituency, and ESPN has a lot of constituencies, rights holders, Deborah mentioned NFL, Big Ten, all the leagues, our advertisers, our cable operators, of course, the people that watch ESPN. But to me, by far, the most important constituency to drive your mission home is to your employees. And I'm really proud of the fact, when I was running ESPN, we had roughly 7,000 employees towards the end. I feel if you wandered the hallways and asked people what their mission was, what our mission is, you'd have a very high percentage, over 90% would be able to tell you it's to serve sports fans. And I truly think that's helped drive the company all these years, and is so important for companies going forward. Know your mission, drive it home, don't forget your employees. Next is brand. Boy, it can be a confusing topic, but I really don't think it needs to be. You know, a brand is what comes to mind when you think about a company, a product, or even a person. You hear all the time people talking about personal brands. But my gosh, I hear more conversation about brands and marketing and theory than I think it's way overcomplicated. And so we try to simplify it, not only for ourselves, but again, for our employees. It's what comes to mind when you think of a company, a product, or a person. Now, like a lot of companies, our brand be able to develop in the early going, and we had some rough times too, like most startups. Take a look.
Over here. Hello. That's the situation in the NL West when Sunday's play began. The Dodgers and Giants deadlocked. I'm heading south. Scores!
We've had a power problem here in beautiful downtown Bristol, Connecticut, but you are still hearing us through the magic of satellite.
Fans booed Canseco's 2 performances and even pounded on the truck he was in when he left the park last night. Can we give you the mic? Thanks.
Yes, this is television where you need a microphone, that is for sure. Okay, so there you see Dave Revson walking right behind me.
Andy, what's your take on this? You agree with Jeff?
Clearly, this is a veteran team, and they take a great deal of satisfaction in this.
Well, they do take a lot of satisfaction.
The same team that had a 49% interest sold also had a major trade rescinded.
All right, so that's the latest word from Jack Donlin. What about the word from NFL Commissioner Pete Rozelle?
He dumped a paper bag containing stocks and bonds worth $1 million. The set is jumping. We'll see you next week.
Ladies and gentlemen, our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see? And the Rockets, red flag. Uh-oh.
Sarge national anthem. Written by Francis Scott Off-Key.
But I think the one thing that's interesting about the USFL people, George, is...
George. In Mobile, Alabama for SportsCenter, Lou Palmer, ESPN.
Runners on your mark. Get set.
You've got to be kidding me. Together, Ramos...
The key to success in the offensive huddle is concentration, and it's over a very short...
Together, Ramos and Hayduk sparked the U.S. offense in the second half against Germany.
Now for Keith Millard, he's almost home again as training camp nears an end.
sir. Can I have you for dinner?
As Syracuse comes from behind at the end to beat Georgetown. And for Philadelphia again, get out of here. That's a wrap. And the news.
Oh my gosh, I've only seen that about 1,000 times, but every time I roll it, I just love watching it. The reason I like to put it up, other than it's fun, is it taught us something. It taught us to take our sports seriously, but not to take ourselves too seriously. We try to get every score right. We try to get every story right. We try to pronounce everybody's name right. We do our best at that. But there's still an opportunity to have fun and to not take yourselves too seriously. And that really infused the ESPN brand going forward. Now, most of you, from what it appears to me, weren't around in 1979 and 1980. But you may know sports were delivered in a very matter-of-fact fashion, 3 minutes on the either side of weather at the late local news. Nothing like this really existed before, where you had anchors on the air hours at a time talking about sports. And our anchors, as you can see, particularly Charlie Steiner, Oberman Patrick, a variety of them up there, they had fun. They were fans. They made mistakes. They laughed at their mistakes. The microphone wasn't working. They're passing it back and forth. I mean, it was just fun. And it really infused the ESPN brand. And so the point is to build and nurture your brand, particularly in today as the entire world has gone digital. Every company out there, your competitors are a keystroke away. Certainly true in the media business. And customers, fans, will do business with companies where they know and respect the brand. So I think nurturing your brand is as true today, perhaps more so than any time in history. I also give credit to the Walt Disney Company. We were purchased by the Walt Disney Company along with ABC in 1996. And they really infused the thinking about your brand and nurturing your brand to us, much more so than we had been in the early going. Now, we're also fortunate because as a TV company, we get to use our own airwaves to communicate. In this case, I brought for you today an advertising campaign called This is SportsCenter. This is a campaign that's been around for over 20 years, which is an eternity in the television business. As you saw that first night when Lee Leonard said that the center of the sports world is like right now, it's here in Bristol, Connecticut, one of the ad agency folks, it was actually the youngest person on the team, the ad team, which taught me a lesson forever, that you didn't need to be the most senior person with gray hair to have all the good ideas. Certainly that is just not true. I know you all know that, but this idea for this gem of an ad campaign came from the youngest person on the ad team. And his idea was, if ESPN is now the center of the sports world, won't the world's greatest athletes be coming to Bristol, Connecticut? And that has spawned hundreds of spots from our parking lots, our cafeterias, our locker rooms, our restrooms, our conference rooms, you name it. And I brought along a few of my favorites to show you.
Hey, Ovi. Hey, what's up? What are you doing in the dark, man?
Nothing, just the late night filings.
Really? Late night filing? What are you, a Russian spy or something?
Yeah, right.
All right, I'll catch you later.
Yeah, see ya.
Пронесло.
Да, уж чуть не спалили.
It's hard to find an expert more dedicated than John Clayton. He's the consummate pro.
We'll see how the 4-3 and the cover 3 work together.
John Clayton with the latest.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
From the NFL, Drew Brees answers $100 million question. Rejuvenated Alex Smith talks about
And whenever we need a brilliant insight, he's available at the drop of a hat.
Hey, Mom! I'm done with my segment!
Not again. I didn't know you guys were watching last night. Thank you guys. It means a lot. Thank you.
What are you talking about, Steph?
I had that 27-10 last night, and today, chicken curry. 54 points last week, and the next day, curry stew.
Yeah, but Steph, I don't think
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. It means a lot. I lace them up every night for guys like you.
Who was that guy? I don't know. Seems like the chicken, though.
Anyway, that's the control room. A lot of chaos there, but it all looks good when it comes out in the show, actually, thanks to those people. Then over here in the digital center is our highlight screening area. So that's where we get all the games that are played that night, down in a 90-second or 2-minute clips or whatever you're going to see on SportsCenter every night. This hallway, it runs between, both rooms. If you want to get from the control room to the screening, then this is the hallway you'd take. Questions or anything? I can answer whatever you want about the place. Nothing?
That campaign, and Ben would know this, has done as much to communicate the brand of the ESPN company as anything we've done in nearly 40 years. And I had the pleasure of really traveling around the world representing ESPN, and I would get as many comments about those spots as anything we did. Now the point is, for you, in whatever company or wherever your career takes you, think about, this is just one form of communication, a commercial spot, but take advantage of everything you produce to communicate your brand. Driving home what that brand is, not only to your employees who see what you produce, but obviously to your customers is critical. And again, this is just an example that ESPN uses, but I would encourage you to think about literally everything you produce for whatever organization you are involved with is to convey the benefits and hopefully the positive attributes of your brand. Again, in trying to simplify things that we could talk about to our employees, and our employees were very appreciative of this, I believe. We came up with what we called the brand promise, which was actually out of Ben's marketing department, that ESPN is sports, which is what we do, with authority, which is how we like to think we do it. Again, we try to get every spelling name, every spelling correct, every score right, every story correct, and that's how we think we do it. And then lastly is the personality. I've shown you some examples of that this morning. It's what we think sets us apart from other, in our case, sports networks. That's the ESPN brand promise. Lastly, and what I think, the reason I leave it for last is I think is most important is culture. And I know you spend a lot of time on that here at the Sloan School. There's obviously a lot of things that as a business person you cannot control. The economy, legislation, what your competitors are doing. You're not going to win every contract. ESPN certainly didn't over the year. But there is one thing that you absolutely can control, particularly if you're the leader. And that, of course, is culture. I call it ESPN's strategic advantage. I don't really know what it was. I don't know if it was our bucolic Bristol, Connecticut location. I don't know if it was our sort of lunch pail work ethic, hard-working place. I interviewed thousands of people over the years that wanted to come to ESPN, and I'd say, we have a nice place to work. You know, you may or may not get this job, but if you get this job and you come here, be prepared to work hard. We worked our tails off. Nobody just fell out of bed and made ESPN a success after 20, 30, nearly 40 years. We worked for it. And that work ethic was alive and well. Family values, integrity. Maybe it was the fact we were the laughing stock of the television business for probably the first 5 to 8 years of our business. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was some combination of all of the above. But out of that combination came a culture that, again, I believe is the strategic advantage of the company. And it's a culture based on passion, hard work, innovation, the kind of things we've been talking about today. And I'd like to take you through a few of those things that demonstrate that. The first is The Little Engine That Could. Perhaps you've heard of this book. It's only sold 10 million copies worldwide. And it teaches the values of optimism and hard work. Every day we read about new digital technology, new companies, new this, new that, new theories on everything. I submit to you that the values of optimism and hard work, they're never going out of style, ever. And they still contribute to an awful lot of people's and companies' success. And that's why I likened the ESPN company to the little engine that could. Long after you could pick up a newspaper every quarter and see that ESPN was driving the Walt Disney Company's earnings. Or long after, as Deborah said, we acquired the Masters, or Monday Night Football, or the BCS Championship. Long after all that success, I didn't want any of our employees to revel in any of that. None of it. I wanted us to keep alive what we knew in 1979 and 1980 and 1981 when we were looking to fill up 24 hours of sports and televising whatever we could get our hands on and outworking our competitors and knowing little by little, whether it was postcards or people stealing our banners at events, that there's a little evidence that people enjoyed what we were doing. That's the spirit that I wanted to make sure to live forever in the ESPN culture, and I believe it is, and I believe things like this help do that. Next is employee passion, and of course, this is just some shots of some of our employees from the early days. I guarantee you, our competitors underestimated the passion of the ESPN employee in the early years. Passion that developed things like the NFL draft, which you may have seen over the last 3 nights last week in primetime. ESPN President Chet Simmons' idea. It might have been the next time you watch a football game and you know exactly whether your favorite player not made a first down, it's because he got to that yellow line. and you never want to watch a game again without knowing exactly where the first down line is, ESPN. Or the next time you enjoy the Final Four, which of course just culminated last month, 2 months ago now. ESPN was the first to televise the early rounds of that tournament when no one even thought there was any interest in it. Now, of course, it's turned into one of the biggest sporting events, not only in the country, but around the world. ESPN had a hand in that in the early going as well. So it's passion that delivers innovation. And I always look for people with passion, because people with passion over-deliver. Time and time and time again. Nothing is easy. There's problems with everything. Deadlines are missed, things you expected to show up on time don't show up, employee issue, whatever. There's nothing is easy. But if you're passionate about what you're doing, you figure out a way to overcome the obstacles. You don't accept no for an answer. You make that last sales call on 5 o'clock on a Friday night when you'd rather go home. That's passion. And I attribute the passion of the ESPN employees to help to really driving this company. Of course, we're fortunate to be in the sports business. And as many of you know, sports are, people are very passionate about sports. Over 90% of Americans self-identify as sports fans. Deborah mentioned my book, Every Town is a Sports Town. The title for that book is when I got out of the mailroom, a job came open in Texas, selling ESPN around Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi. I didn't even really know what the job entailed. I just knew I wanted to get into sales and marketing. So I applied for the job. I got some marketing magazines from some of the guys and read them on the flight down to Texas, so hoping I could just sound somewhat intelligent about the business. I knew nothing. I got the job. I later learned I was the only person in the company who applied for it. True. But 2 weeks later, I was driving around Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi, trying to make 3 sales calls a day on mom and pop cable operators, saying, we have this 24-hour sports network, and we'd like you to add it to your cable system. I heard the same thing in every town, whether I was in Biloxi, Waco, Tulsa, Jackson, Mississippi, wherever I was in those 5 states. It was, George, 24-hour sports sounds like a crazy idea. Why would anybody need something like that or even want something like that? Remember, this was all before 24 hours of everything, which we all enjoy now. But we'll put it on, because we have open channels. If you're going to give it away, which we were at the time, because this is a sports town. And I heard that in every single town in this great country, the United States, that I was in. Think about this town. Think about the towns where you're all from and what sports means. And that's how I got the title for the book, Every Town is a Sports Town. And that's really what drove the ESPN company. ESPN simply tapped into that passion that you see exhibited here on the screen. We built some sports, we used to call them sports bars. Disney called them regional entertainment. And we wanted to get some original artwork and not just put up regular old sports posters. So we found this photograph. This was the AP Sports Photo of the Year in 1965. It's Deerfield Academy at Mount Herman's, right here in Massachusetts. And as you can see, there's a full-blown blaze going on right during the football game. And they kept playing. I kept it up. I blew that up and kept it in front of my office door for about 10 years to get across why having your priorities in line is important. By the way, it was a tough day for Mount Herman's. They lost the game and their science building. But the point is, again, whether you're running the ESPN company or any organization, having your priorities straight and communicating them to your employees is critical. And I can't tell you how important that was to the ESPN company over the last few years. When our ratings were tanking in 2002, I'd been president for 4 years, and I walked around Bristol saying, what do you think about our ratings problem? And I got a lot of blank stares, and what do you mean? And I learned an unbelievable lesson. I learned that in 2002, only 15 years ago, the majority of our executives got most of their information by reading the press releases of the company. Well, the press department, the communications department, they only put out the good news. They don't put out press releases like ratings tanking, president clueless, nobody has a plan. If they put out a press release like that, it would have saved us a lot of time, but they don't. So I learned it the hard way, and we put together some people in a room and said, guys, our ratings are tanking. We have absolutely no plan to turn it around. What do you think we ought to do? Not brain surgery. Somebody in the back of the room said, why don't we make raising ratings our company priority? And we rallied the management team and the whole company around simply setting priorities, communicating them to all 7,000 employees, encouraging/expecting everybody to contribute to growing them. It's not just the programming department's responsibility. And ESPN went on a ratings tear that lasted 10 or 12 years unabated. So the point is, set priorities and communicate what they are. Of course, you have to figure out how to achieve them and build teams and communicate, but set priorities and communicate. It's extremely valuable process. And I never missed an opportunity to reinforce what the mission of the company is, so we simply printed that on the other side of the card. Vince Lombardi probably rivals Yogi Berra for best sports quotes, but I like this one because it simply talks about the value of a team. I wasn't big on the star system. Great if you were the smartest person in the room, or great if you were the smartest person in your department. Show me that you can lead. Show me you can help other people. That's what we were looking for. That's really where you get the real power of having people on a team, is working together. We developed a definition of leadership. You can see we were big on definitions and making things easy. But for us, our definition of leadership was leaders make other people better. And there's plenty of ways to do that. Mentoring, sharing information, et cetera, come to mind. That's who we were looking for. That's who got promoted to ESPN. We called them culture carriers. Be a leader. You don't have to be running the department. You don't have to aspire to run the department. You don't have to want to be president of the company. A lot of people are happy with what they're doing, which is great. But I did find that this message resonated well with people about being a leader. And that was our definition of leadership, so we could make it work. So if it all comes together, you develop a culture, a winning culture, that breeds and feeds on success. And I know you talk about innovation here a lot, and it's an important topic. Innovation is the holy grail for companies. It's the holy grail. And if you can develop a company and a company culture that breeds on innovation and breeds and feeds on success, boy, you've really built a heck of a culture that gives you a big chance, a big step up at continuing to run a successful business. So we've talked a little bit about mission, brand, and culture here this morning. Our mission has evolved over the years, and it's certainly healthy. Our business has evolved. I mean, I suspect every single one of you have a computer in your pocket that you use for a phone and other things. That didn't exist when we first started. Sports fans want the score. They want to know it. They want to see it, and we had to move with that. So we updated our mission. It's healthy to update your mission. Don't just set your mission and put it in your bottom desk drawer and think you're done. Get it out, keep it alive, update it when you have to. The ESPN brand has certainly evolved over the years, from college hockey and softball and Aussie rules football to the things you see here, although we still televise those events as well. There's every sport has its fans, and ESPN wishes to try to serve those fans as best we can. And lastly is make your culture your strategic advantage. My gosh, think about culture as an asset. Think about it as a weapon. Think about it as something you can do in your business to make your business separate out from your competitors. Deborah mentioned the V Foundation that I'm involved with for cancer research. I'm not putting this up here to solicit your support, although happy to accept your support if you're interested in funding cancer research. But I put it up there for this point. ESPN has always been very philanthropically oriented. And I believe a lot of people today want to know that their company stands for something more than just making money. Yes, companies are in business to make money. And your job as a leader of a company is to make as much money as you can for as long as you can. That is your role as a corporate leader. But I also believe, as I just said, it means something to a lot of people that you stand for something besides that, beyond that. And helping people who are less fortunate, to me, has served a valuable goal in helping build the culture of ESPN. And the V Foundation is simply one vehicle we use to do that. So with that, that's my ESPN in 35 minutes. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have in our remaining time. And please, if you do have a question, please wait for the microphone to be delivered to you so everybody can hear your question. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you a lot for your talk. I was wondering, what do you think about the future of the sports broadcasting? Like now there are companies like NextVR that you can basically watch sports in the first row, basically in virtual reality. What do you think is the future of ESPN, for instance?
Oh my gosh, it's so much easier now being on the sideline saying, here's what I think I would do, than being at the line of scrimmage trying to figure it all out. But my gosh, the business is changing so quickly and so fast. I'm not a VR expert, but I certainly think it's got a place in the sports broadcasting, if you will, going forward. And I would assume and hope that ESPN's playing a valuable role in there. I don't know exactly where ESPN is. I've been out of the company now several years, but that's just a good example. I mean, VR is exploding. Esports is exploding. I saw this morning in the paper, Twitter has signed up for to stream women's NBA, golf tournament, other things. So there's a company evolving right before your very eyes, another competitor to ESPN. So I believe that the future of ESPN is extremely bright, to answer the second part of your question. But they're going to have to continue to evolve, which I think you're seeing, and was certainly headlines last week. I mean, nothing at ESPN happens in a vacuum. The company gets covered, significantly by all media and analysts and everything. Nothing happens without it making news, and you could, perhaps saw some of that last week. But you're seeing the company evolve. But I truly believe that it's evolving because of the culture looking for new ways to serve fans. And so if the ESPN management, my successor, John Skipper, determines VR is one way to do that, then I assume you'll see them moving in that direction. I think it's exciting, actually, if you're a sports fan. There's never been access to more content, more models, and more opportunity as a sports fan than ever in the history of the world. That's not an overstatement, and I only see that continuing.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I was wondering, what do you think was the point of inflection from becoming a driver from $8,300 to, and what, like the moment when your career jumped? And once it jumped over the years, what do you think were the most valuable attributes and characteristics as a leader that were most valuable to your employees, and how do you build on them? Thank you.
That's a great question. If you answer part of that question and saying you're humble, does that not make you humble because you answer the question that way? I don't know. It feels like it does. But I think I think starting in the mailroom was a tremendous advantage for me. Some people say it to you like, they're sorry, or like that must have been a dark period in your life or something. It's like, that was anything but. It was actually a benefit because I got to see the company literally from the ground up. I got to meet everybody. The ride from Bristol to the Hartford airport was about 40 minutes on a good day with no traffic. I used to drive all the executives back and forth to the airport. Once I had you in my car, unless you decided to walk, I had you for 40 minutes. And I used that. I think there's learning opportunities in everything. And there was a learning opportunity. Who gets 40 minutes with executives in a car? They can't get out. And through that process, I determined that I was more suited to sales and marketing than production and programming. So it helped me figure out where I wanted to go. And then the ESPN company was the kind of company, and I believe it still is today, where somebody in the mailroom can send a note to the head of advertising sales and say, hey, I'm Jorge Bodenheimer. I may be interested in ad sales. Could I come and see you sometime? And you get a response and a sure, come in, next Tuesday at 10 o'clock. That actually happened. And, people would talk to you about your careers. So the reason I like that anecdote is there's opportunity in everything, and ask people for help. People have big hearts, and 9 times out of 10, people will help you. And you can't do it alone out there. You need mentors. You need people that help you in your careers. Being a solo warrior at any one of these companies is not the way to be. Build your base. Be friendly. Say hello to people. And so I used to get to know people, and they helped me all along. I was very fortunate to get on with a growing company. And I was able to just continue to grow in the company. I worked extremely hard, but it was in part because of people I met along the way.
On your slide about priorities, the number 3 one was increasing diversity and inclusion at ESPN. And another cable network has been in the news a lot over the last year for kind of having a culture that seems to have been hostile and dangerous for women. I was wondering, as an executive, could you talk about some of the concrete steps you did to make ESPN a more inclusive and welcoming place for people from different backgrounds?
My gosh, thank you for asking that question. I mean, I'm very proud of the diverse nature of the ESPN company. We weren't always that way. Probably, I'm trying to think, it was probably early 2000s. Hired a new head of human resources, Kerry Chandler, and she and I basically started a program and announced to the company that we were going to become a much more diverse company. And it was difficult. People either don't understand it, they don't want to understand it, or it's confusing, or they're not sure what the message is. It's got all of that and more. I do remember that we talked at the time that it was going to take us 10 years to become a much more diverse company. And I had heard that at an industry conference. It wasn't an original idea, but I thought that was very valuable because it not only said we're in this for the long term, not like, we're going to check this off 6 months from now and say, well, boy, we're a lot more diverse, so what's next? Doesn't work that way. But secondly, I think it also just sort of not took the pressure off, but it set a tone for like, we're changing completely as a company, and we know it's going to take some time. My gosh, the ESPN company would not be anywhere near as successful without the diversity, and in this case, I'm talking women, which has made the news that you were referring to, I think. The ESPN company would not anywhere near as successful as it is without the women, the contributions of the women at ESPN, both in front of and behind the camera. My 13 years as president, my CFO was a woman. She still is. Head of communications, big positions in the company all around. I mean, it's really driven the company. Beyond just gender, I remember when we started the first ESPN Hispanic network, we had a number of white males around the room trying to decide this. And it was a bad effort, and it took us forever to get going because we did not simply have enough diversity in the room to tell us what kind of programming would appeal to Hispanic viewers. And I know that sounds painfully naive, but that's the reality. And it took us a few years to get our act together there. And, but I'm proud of the diversity of the ESPN company. And my successor, John Skipper, has absolutely doubled down on that going forward. And I'm proud of where the company is. Thank you for asking that.
Hello. Okay. Yeah, I was born and raised in Boston. I'm happy about that. But my parents are from Haiti. So it seemed like growing up, I was born in the early 70s. So my whole life, all my Haitian colleagues and family, all they talk about is soccer. It's like that's the only sports they play down there. So I'm wondering, I guess to springboard the last question, what is ESPN doing to expand its reach into developing countries like Haiti and tapping into that passion, for instance, soccer that they have, and potentially showcasing that to the world so that they could potentially, other teams could pick them up, like a player that's qualified to join, a top-ranked team. And not just Haiti, but any developing country. So what is ESPN doing, in that sense for developing countries?
Well, I mean, that's a really excellent question. I mean, I'll give you my favorite answer as when I was president, because it still works. I don't know. But, I mean, I'm trying to be a little funny, but evidently it wasn't that funny. Other than televising sports that are local, in this case in the country of Haiti, and doing our best to distribute them and make a profit in those countries as best we can, to my knowledge, we're not doing anything specifically to highlight, in your example, Haitian soccer players so they can be seen by others. So I don't think the company's doing a lot to answer your specific question there. We certainly are trying our best to distribute the products locally as best we can throughout Haiti and throughout the regions. But specifically your question, probably not a lot. Honest answer.
And with that, please join me in thanking Jorge. As you're leaving, I'd like you to just think about something. Whose leadership story do you want to hear? We're trying to get students to join the iLead committee to help us think about which leaders do you want to hear about, and can you help us to think about streamlining the set of speakers? So if you're interested, please go to either a sign-up sheet outside the door today or to the website, the MIT Leadership Center website. We'd love to get you engaged and involved. Thanks.